All right, everyone, welcome to the Game Changer Show. I'm your host, Mike McKay, and each and every week we do this show with people who are changing the game. So this week on the show, we have Anthony Pappas. Anthony, welcome to the show.
Appreciate you having me. Thank you.
For sure, man. So for the people who don't know you, could you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in real estate and how that's led you to where you are today?
So my background is I grew up in the trades. I was a plumber for about 12 years and kept doing projects for other people that showed up in way nicer trucks than me, and they didn't have any tools. I was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? So got one of the developers to sit down with me, and I kind of was like, so what do you do? And he's like, well, I put deals together. The closer you get to the money, the more you get paid. I started thinking about it like, oh, well, maybe there's an opportunity here. And a good friend of mine at the time said, hey, you got to read this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's going to completely change your mindset on things. I was like, it's another woo-woo book. It's not going to do anything. Got into Rich Dad, Poor Dad, realized, okay, there's something here, and reached out to a buddy of mine, Trevor Bradley, who's a traditional agent in Arizona, just crushing it. And I was like, I got to get into real estate. I read this book. I don't need any money. I can just invest and make all this money. He's like, well, you're going to need some money. So have you considered wholesaling? He plugged me in with Steve Trang. I worked on Steve Trang's team for a little bit, got to learn the ins and outs. Realized I'm a terrible employee and want to go against the grain. So what branched out on my own and fell into land because of the development background I had, building these single family homes, multifamily complexes from the ground up. I knew about the utilities, grading,
Mm,
drainage, all that kind of stuff that most people didn't have an understanding on. So when I hit the phones calling land, I was able to have a different conversation than most regular wholesalers. They're just like, hey, do you want to sell it? No, yes. I'm like, okay, I'll send you an
mm.
offer. Compared to I started saying, hey, what utilities are there? Have you gotten any plans approved? Have you done anything with the grading? It looks like there's a wash running through the back end. What kind of setbacks do you have to have? And it changes that, um, rapport building with the seller because like, oh, this guy sounds a little more legitimate.
Yeah. Were you finding that a lot of people you ran into were like kind of like the more educated seller who would kind of respect that, or is there like kind of a mix where you're still working sometimes with the people who like, they don't it doesn't really matter what you know. They're just going to kind of sell to the person who comes along.
Yeah, it's a great question. In Arizona, a lot of the people that own land, they seem to be a little more sophisticated. Every now and
Mm,
again, you get somebody that inherited the lot or they just bought it and they were going to build a house and never did. But normally it's people that are a little more sophisticated because they have enough money to just buy some vacant land somewhere and sit on it. So
mm,
they have a little more cash compared to maybe someone got into a house that they couldn't afford and they have to sell it at a discount or something like that. With land, from my experience, they were a little more sophisticated. They're a little more knowledgeable because some of the stuff they probably already looked into. Maybe they already looked into the cost of a well or cost of utilities. And if you
mm.
are a bona fide buyer that's coming in and saying, hey, this is what I do, and you don't know any of these things, it kind of puts up a red flag to some of the people. Because we've had them question me, like, oh, what's a perk test? I'm like, well, it's to make sure that the ground's going to allow for septic because you don't have sewer nearby. I'm like, okay. And it just kind of changes the flow of the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So you started off like wholesaling that land at
Mhm.
first, and then I think you said you jumped into some doing some entitlement stuff.
Yep, caught the end of the low interest rates, which was great for entitlement.
Yeah.
Took it in the shorts on a few of them when the interest rates went the other way. It was supposed to be our first $1 million assignment. We finally got it across the finish line for a 380 unit apartment complex, but the assignment fee dropped from 1 million to 500, which is still not a terrible day.
Yeah.
But I was finally trying to check that milestone of $1 million assignment off the wish list. But yeah, I got into buying land that I thought would be great for entitling. Same with like
Mm,
minor lot splits, picking up 5 acres, turning it into all in an acre and a quarter, or split it up into five where you can, and selling off individual lots. Or a lot of
mhm,
the builders we work with too, they don't want to split the lots. They don't want to deal with any of the headache with the cities and stuff. So they want you to do it. If you can go and get the plans approved, or even just
mm.
get preliminary plans approved for like a rezone, then they'll take it over and pick it up then. So anything we can do to value add on the lot was kind of our niche for a while.
Yeah. And then for people who are listening who maybe don't know about what entitlement is, can you explain what that process looks like?
So the word entitlement means a few different things to a few different people. From the way I look at it
Yeah,
is
sure.
plans fully approved for whatever the project is. Some people will
Mm,
say, oh, a lot split is entitlement. Yes and no. But to me, full entitlement are getting the plans approved, everything ready to go, pay permits, and you can start building.
yeah. And so for people who like don't really understand that, let's say you put this piece of land under contract and you go through that process, like how does that add value to the property?
So, for an example, if you find land that say is 3 acres, and you can put 3 houses because its current zoning is like R43, which means 1 house per acre.
Hmm.
The value of the land's capped at what those houses can sell for, less the cost to build, profit, agent fees, everything like that. That's your total value you can get out of that. That's the highest and best use. Now, if you can rezone that up to commercial or multifamily, and you can
Hmm.
put 70 doors on that lot, now you force appreciate the land through what can be built. Or if you can put like a drive-through restaurant and a little shopping plaza, you can force appreciate it because the value of what you're going to build on those higher ends is going to be way higher. So the cost they can pay for the land is significantly higher.
Gotcha. And is that still like your main focus is entitlement? Because you said like kind of like that was what you were focusing on. So.
So yes, we're still looking for entitlement plays, except for what long-term debt has really slowed down a lot of the multifamily builders we were working with that wanted to take it on. Even there's one that a 10 unit that we were looking to build that kind of fell apart because when we first ran numbers, everything looked great, and then now interest rates tripled from what it was then, and just nothing cash flowed anymore. Thankfully, we found a great buyer for it that does Section 8 rentals. So he's able to cash flow on
Mm.
it because he's going to get Section 8 rentals compared to market rentals, which I guess Section 8 was significantly higher than what the market would bear, which is very interesting. But yeah,
Mhm.
now we're doing kind of Logan Fulmer's method, still land, but we're looking for land that we can buy at a super uh, I don't want to say cheap, but super cheap entry, so
Mhm.
that offsets the risks of where the market may go. Because we're into
Mhm.
it for so cheap that we can weather a storm of a few years if we have to wait on it, and we can still entitle the land, but we don't have the risk of having to pay market value for something, or even slightly discounted at a wholesale fee. Because I know a lot of people that bought land at a wholesale pricing 2 years ago that are trying to dump
Mm.
it on market right now, and nobody will touch it. So but that's all very market specific. Like Central Phoenix is still, if you can get anything under contract there, it sells next day just because the market is still alive and well. But builders and buyers are kind of being a little more cautious with their numbers. Is what we're seeing.
And is your target area still like the Phoenix metro area, or have you expanded out from there?
We've expanded out just looking for opportunities. We've done some stuff out in Florida, Texas, Arkansas, North Carolina, Arizona, and those are kind of where we're at right now, but always looking for just kind of following the migration patterns where people are moving to. Florida
Mm.
was great, but then the EPA a couple of years back changed some of the regulations on their wetland permits, and now just some of the mediation process or mitigation process has gotten so expensive that a lot of the deals that were just very, very juicy are cut down, because when you're spending $70,000 to mitigate an acre of land, it just kind of kills the deal unless you're getting it for basically free.
Mhm. So this new method that you guys are doing, or the
Mhm.
Logan Fulmer method, as you mentioned, like, can you talk a little bit more about like what your kind of unique approach to that is?
So it's we're following his thing to a T, but we're still looking at land that we can entitle. Like we're watching. So the Logan Fulmer method, for a lot of people that don't know, is called it's distressed properties. We're looking for people facing tax foreclosures, and normally with a deceased owner and multiple heirs. And the reason why
Mhm.
you can get such a good deal from the multiple heirs is you'll get people that are great grandkids that don't care about the land. And now they're getting pulled into a tax lawsuit from the county saying, hey, you owe us 30 grand, or at least your portion of it. What are you going to do? And if they don't do anything, it just gets auctioned off and they get nothing. So we come in and say, hey, we'll give you $1,000 for your time. You sign some paperwork, you're done, and we'll take on the risk. We'll go fight with the county. We'll cover the back taxes. You're completely released from that. So a lot of people are willing to do that. And then we
Mhm.
can come in and we're into it for super cheap. So now we can entitle it. And even if the market tanks 10, 20%, we're still in it at such a low cost basis that it looks really well.
So are you so you're still targeting land, but you said it's mostly stuff that's going to the tax auction is where you find the majority of your stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. Tax auction, and it doesn't always have to be tax auction, but normally some indicator of distress helps. But even just a deceased owner, multiple heirs, especially if the deceased owner died a few years ago and nothing's been done with the property, that would normally
Mhm.
indicate there's infighting, because most people, when they inherit a property, the first thing they do is dump it.
Yeah.
And a lot of these people we talk to are like, yeah, it's me and 6 of my cousins, and they're all use a a terrible word there, and they don't get along, and they won't let me sell it, or this person doesn't want to sell, but I want to sell, and that's where we get to come in and say, you can sell your individual airship, right? And like nobody's ever told me that before. So we've
Mm,
we've helped some people. There's a great lady we helped. Her family refuses to sell, but she needed out. She lost her job, she was about to lose her car, about to lose her house, and she's like, I need money, I need to sell, I can't find anybody to buy this. And that's when we said, yeah, we can buy your airship, and put 6 grand in her pocket so she could get back on her feet, which was amazing.
yeah. And then in that situation, because I know sometimes these things end up getting litigated, but you took over her share. Where'd you go from
Mhm.
there in that story?
So that one's still still ongoing. Three of the family members, that their total market value, if you will, share value is probably like 50 grand. Like, we want 150. I'm like, it's never gonna happen. So unfortunately, you pay off the taxes in a lot of cases. Then you have to send demand letters saying, hey, you owe me this amount of taxes to keep this current, and we can stay in
Mm,
this and partner on it and sell it. And then a lot of them tell you to pound sand. We're not giving you nothing. And then you have to do what's known as a creditor lawsuit, where you then take them to court saying, hey, get a court order saying they have to pay it back to you, or sell their portion and work out a deal there. So normally the creditor lawsuit stops it, but litigation is always a fun mess of a time. The only people that win in litigation are the attorneys, is what I'm learning.
yeah. Wait, so is that because I've heard of people doing partitions. I'm not as familiar
Mhm,
with this method. I've only done like this like one time, so I'm kind of a newbie at it. But like, what's the difference between like the creditor lawsuit and the
mhm.
partition? Like, is that faster? Is there like a reason that you go that route, or?
So the creditor is much more aggressive. So a partition works if, say, there's no taxes and it's not going to get lost. But if we're facing a tax foreclosure and say the back taxes are 30 grand, and we've already bought one air out for 5 grand, we're going to lose out on our 5 grand if it goes to auction. So we pay off the taxes. In a creditor lawsuit, is I'm coming after you as a creditor for the debt you owe, which is your portion of the taxes, compared to like a partition, which is you go
Ah,
before the court and say, hey, we want to sell this, they're holding us hostage, and the court can order the sale and you get your percentage of the sale. Or sometimes they'll even have you go out, say it's 5 acres, they'll survey it out. If there's 5 heirs, you bought one out, you get 1 acre of the 5 acres, and you do a
mm,
survey and split it off.
yeah. And so so give me a little clarity. Like, what's the advantage of the creditor route if you have the option versus doing the partition?
So partition's great if everybody's, at least somewhat reasonable and willing to have a civil conversation, and there's no taxes owed. The creditor is kind of where
Okay.
you have to go if you're covering all the taxes. Yeah, I
Mm,
mean, you could pay
okay.
off the taxes and go for a partition, but from our experience, it's just better go creditor suit and say, hey, either come up with the money or sell out your share, because you're not going to hold us hostage to this deal, and you owe us a sizable amount of money for your taxes that are owed.
Gotcha. Because you went ahead and you fronted essentially the taxes for maybe the other 5 heirs or whoever it was.
Exactly. And we're doing a lot of that, unfortunately, because there are holdouts in the family that some people don't want to sell, not because they care about the land, but because of the infighting in the family. They just want to be difficult. We have four
Mhm.
heirs that have 20% ownership of this deal. And they're like, I didn't know my grandfather. I don't know what any of this is about. I don't want nothing to do with it. Don't call me again. Like, well, we're going to pay you money for your time. Just what number would you want to sell at? They're like, I don't want money. I want nothing to do with this. So in that situation,
Huh.
a partition, I guess we could try to do a partition, but on some lots too, if let's say it's a weird shaped lot or a small lot that's only 1 acre, and the minimum size of the lot for the neighborhood is 1 acre, you can't really do a partition and split up the lot. You could do a partition sale where they force the sale and you get your spread of it. But if you're
Yeah.
out on the taxes too, you want to make sure you're reimbursed for those taxes. And that's why our attorney normally steers us towards a creditor.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and then like what are some challenges that have come up with doing, obviously there's some difficult people, right? But what are some challenges that you guys have come across besides difficult people like doing this method?
So sometimes you don't always know exactly what you're getting into before you get into it. Like, you'll get into a
Mm.
deal thinking there's no other judgments or liens, and then you find out there's some old Medicaid lien since forever ago, or there's an old oil lease that you have to figure out how to get removed from the property, and just weird stuff like that, and a lot of fraud. Some people have
Huh.
common names, or we had two individuals that thought they're the rightful heirs to it, and they claimed they had the right to sell it to us. Thankfully, we did our due diligence on it, because they're we would have lost some money on this if they would have accepted our first offer, because it was just like, yeah, it looks pretty solid. But we ended up tracking down an old will that was left by their father, giving it all to their stepmother. And they told us
Wow.
there was no, they just lied to us that there's no will, it was theirs, it was left by their father, and everything seemed to check out at first. And then we got the county to go dig through their old records, and they're like, no, there was a will, and there was a monument of title that passed everything over to her correctly, so she's the rightful heir. And then we had to reach out to all her brothers and sisters, because she had no living
Mm,
descendants, and then buy the individual heirship from all of her relatives. So
wow.
understanding the in-estate laws of how things pass when someone dies is very important in that line of work. But it's also, I think everyone should know it just for real estate in general, no matter what you're doing, because if you can find land or houses that nobody cares about, your spread's going to be way larger than your regular wholesale deal where you're trying to buy it like 70 cents on the dollar.
Yeah. So what does your due diligence look like when you put one of these heirs under contract to make sure something like that doesn't happen?
It's excessive. You're doing a lot of digging, trying to pull every deed you can. Obviously, running like a title report with a trusted title company just to get ahead of it. And as soon as we have like one heir that seems like they're good to go, we'll run the title report, because we have to front it, because we're buying this outside of title insurance. So we're clearing up
Mm,
all the issues outside of title, then clearing everything up, and then we get title insurance once we own it and once all the issues have been resolved. So that's kind of the interesting side of it. But having a good title company, because they're not going to just cover your your cost for the title report if you're not opening escrow with them yet. So we pay the fee just to get a good title report ran of, hey, what other issues might be running into. We use ancestry.com, build out big extensive family trees, dig through every skip trace provider you can find just to try to cross reference everything. And yeah, it's you're playing a little more detective or private investigator than real estate investor, but it's where the juicy deals are found.
yeah. So do you have like how do you have that structured like on your team? Is there like a person who handles that side of it or like what's your approach?
So yeah, we have two guys that are constantly scanning through the county, checking for new properties that are, facing tax foreclosures, and then they
Mhm.
find the preliminary ones that look pretty good. Normally, they try to confirm if someone's deceased. They put it into Podio. Then the acquisition guys start stepping in and building out these family trees. And then I step in right as we're about to start sending money out, just to make sure everything is as it should be, because you you do it long enough, you're gonna lose some, and you're gonna spend some money on some errors that probably weren't there. But that's just kind of nature of the beast.
Yeah. I do remember when we had Logan on the show, he said he did one where he bought out 50 heirs or something. And he's like, we went back after and realized that four of them weren't really heirs, but we only gave him $500. So it was like, whatever.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, and that's what a lot of the times it's the like there was a bunch of distant cousins that had like 1% ownership, and we gave them $150 each, and then we ended up paying mobile notaries 150 to $200, so that the notaries were making more than the heirs. But when you start breaking down these fractional airships, it's they really don't have much other than a tiny percentage of a say of what goes on with the property. And we have to a lot of times explain to people that it's not a scam, and explain the family tree and how it even got to them and why they're involved. And like, I did get something from the courts, but I thought it was a scam. I'm like, no, it's not a scam. They do want their tax money, and this is why you're tied to it. So a lot of educating as well. But if you haven't
sure.
listened to the Logan Fulmer podcast, you guys did go back and listen to it, because it's a lot of nuggets in there.
Yeah. So Um, you mentioned too, like you sometimes find people, obviously tax auction, right? You've got two guys scanning for that all the time, putting it in your CRM. But then you also said you look at people who've deceased a couple years ago, but nothing's been done with the property. So how do you go about like finding that information?
So a lot of counties, what's nice is they'll label something at all, or you can also pull if you have a data provider that gives you like the average estimated age of the owner. If they're
Mhm.
95 and above, there's a pretty good indicator. Or you can also look at last deed transfer. If the last
Uh-huh.
deed transfer was, early 70s or 80s, we'll start looking at those as well. Like, there might be
Mm.
something here. So yeah, if the deed hasn't been transferred in a very long time, to where if you do the math, the person would be 105 today since when they bought the property, and I doubt they bought it when they were 1 years old. There might be a deceased owner in there. So those have worked really well for us. And we stumbled into it doing it out here in Arizona before I
Mm.
met up with Logan, and, got to learn how he did it at a much higher level. And I was like, there's so many good lots, but nobody can touch them, because, agents will be like, oh, it needs quiet title and this and that. And then we started figuring out how to make one of the members of the family the administrator of the estate, or doing affidavits of heirship and kind of work through the process legally to un- unstick these problems that have been there for generations.
Yeah, talk about that. So you said, the agent saw you had to do a quiet title, but talk about that strategy for a moment. Sounds interesting.
So yeah, there's one in Phoenix. It was a nice infill lot. There's four brothers that inherited it from their father, but the father got it from his mother. So there's a broken chain of title from her to him to the sons. So what we were able to do with the attorney here in Arizona, with Fowler St. Clair, they came in and then we were able to make myself the special administrator of the grandmother's estate, so that we could deed it over correctly to the fathers, and then it could be deeded down to the sons. And the reason we did that was just because we're fronting all of the costs for the probate attorney. We didn't want to get taking it in the shorts, pay for it, the attorney, make one of the sons the administrator of the estate, and then they say, actually, I don't want to sell to you anymore. And now you're trying to sue someone over a lot that's just really not worth going after specific performance on. So that's the way we did it. Arizona laws are changing because a lot of people were defrauding that system, and they were
Mm.
abusing it, making one person of the family the rightful heir to it, and the others didn't even know what was going on, and they're able to push stuff through the courts. So title companies are leaning more towards affidavits of heirship now, kind of breaking everything down with the court process. But there's a few different ways to solve these problems. And if you are going to go this route, you are going to need a good attorney. So it does help to have a little bit of liquidity, because a good attorney is going to be worth their weight in gold. And if you're in Arizona and Georgia, hit up Fowler St. Clair, because they've been amazing to us.
How did you how did you find your attorneys initially who were like good at doing this?
Yeah, started reaching out to other people in the industry. Like another
Mm.
amazing woman out here that does probate attorneys is Daniel Graham. She's amazing at what she does. And so you just start talking to people in the network and say, hey, who have you worked with to get through this kind of issue? Hey, do you have a really good, because not all attorneys do the same thing. Some might just do contracts drafting, some might just do litigation. I like to find an attorney that kind of has everything in house, because if it's the same guy writing your contract that then has to defend it in litigation, I feel a little better about it, compared to you
Mm.
have attorney A write the contract and now attorney B is having to defend their contract that they wrote. And they're like, this, I hate how they worded this. I can't defend against that. So it just kind of helps to find one
Mm.
that has everything in the houses, from what I've learned going through a few different attorneys.
Yeah. So what percentage of your business now is this kind of like partial interest method versus just kind of traditional land deals?
Yeah, we've pivoted about 90% of business just to these deals, because a
Wow.
lot of people in land may have experienced this as well, where we were spending a lot more money in marketing for a lot less volume and actual deals closing. A lot of
Mm.
sellers were stuck on their 2020, 2021 pricing, and with
Mm.
the counties catching up and constantly inflating the tax estimated amount, a lot of sellers are seeing that and like, well, I should get 120 for this, but you can show them active comps in their area that have sold for 100, but they don't want to budge on it. And obviously that's
Uh,
back to finding pain motivation and a realistic seller. But I've noticed that it's become a little harder to find those. So I like someone that actually has an issue that needs to be resolved, and we can make them problem aware and solution aware, and figure out how
mhm.
to resolve those issues.
Gotcha. So, so now you've pivoted 90% to this.
hmm
I guess like when you go to sell stuff like that you've entitled, how has that changed from, when everyone was buying up everything in 2020, 2021, maybe early 22, depending on where you were?
Yeah, what was nice with low interest rates is we're getting a lot of stuff sold in the preliminary approval stage, so we didn't have to have
Wow.
full entitlements. A lot of builders we'd set up the like a pre-application meeting with the city and have them join the Zoom. And if the city would just gave their blessing, like, yeah, this project looks good, we have a few issues we want changed around, but we're probably going to be in favor of this rezone, they're willing to do that. Compared to now, a lot of the builders need that
Mm.
final stamp saying this is fully approved to take that kind of risk, just because everything's changed so drastically. Like the 380 unit apartment complex we did, um, back in the day, that would have sold, preliminary approvals as soon as the city said, yeah, this looks good. But with how the cities are changing, the demand is changing, people want that certainty that it's going to make it all the way through.
Yeah. And what is, I mean, obviously it varies, based on the deal size, but kind of averages, what's your amount of time it takes from you from like, okay, I'm going to start this entitlement process until having that full entitlement so that you can line up that buyer?
Depending on the project size, the lot splits and, maybe single family approvals can go relatively faster, 6 to 8 months.
Hmm.
But even now, depending on the jurisdiction, those are getting pushed back to a year. A 10-unit apartment that we were estimating 12 to 14 months ended up taking 2 years because the city had
Wow.
an old storm basin running through the lot that they had rerouted to a storm drain system back in 2008, and we had to prove to them that they had done that and no longer needed the storm runoff through the property. And I was like, your manhole says City of Phoenix sewer or storm right there. But yeah, so that was a fun thing to prove to them that they had already rerouted. But yeah, so there are those uncertainties that you'll come across. Same with the 380 unit. That one went about 2 years long. We
Mhm.
originally estimated about a year, but that's because we got some pushback. Planning and zoning originally denied the project. So we had to
Mhm.
take it up to city council to get their override for it, which thankfully we got. And it's going to be, it's needed for the area. They really need some affordable housing in this area. They've already closed down 2 schools in that district because not enough younger demographic was moving out there. So it's something the city really needed. And thankfully city council saw it that way.
Yeah. So who are like the people that you need involved? Like, let's say you go do one of these entitlements, and I don't really know much about entitlement. Like, who are the like vendors or people on your team you need in order to get that like across the finish line?
Yeah, so early on, you need a good surveyor that's going to do. We always do an Alta survey with elevations and or with topographical survey as well, all right
Hmm.
up front. We used to do it like a boundary survey, and then kind of escalate from there. But we just do an Alta with topo right off rip, so we know the elevations, everything like that. Then we can get it over to the architect. They'll draw up a quick preliminary site plan for us, and then a good entitlement attorney is worth their weight in gold. I'm not the
Mm.
smartest man alive, and I would rather pay smarter people to do the job for me. Some people are brave enough to take on that fight by themselves. If it's single family house, yeah, you can. But anything bigger, entitlement attorneys worth their weight in gold. Then you're going to need a good engineer on the team to do it. And then just over time, you start building up that, finding a good group that all meshes well together. And normally, if you find a good entitlement attorney, he has a great architect and engineer, or vice versa. You could find a good engineer that has. And if you get a group of people that all like working together, it moves a lot smoother. I learned from my
Mm.
mistake. If you just build your own team and they've never worked together and two of them hate each other by the end of it, it makes the project a nightmare. So
Yeah. So what is typically the part that takes the longest in those projects that end up being 18 months, 2 years?
yeah, it's always a hurry up and wait. It's always waiting on the city
Mm.
because you go through, and obviously this is county and city specific. Some places in Texas, you should walk in with plans and they stamp it and you're done. But in Arizona, like City of Phoenix was so backlogged post COVID, and they started putting in so much more regulations on everything that it just slowed everything down. Like we'd be in the final stages where think we're good to get approvals, and then someone from fire would come in and be like, well, I don't like this retaining wall here because I can't put my fire hose over it. And it's like, well, your city is requiring us to do that small pony wall all the way around the property to kind of keep kids from walking back and forth through the lot. He's like, well, it can't be there. So then we had to get it with the engineer
Wow.
and move a fire hydrant to the inside of the wall. So just all that kind of bureaucratic stuff that takes place to get plans approved. It's always
Yeah.
a hurry up and wait with the city because they're so
Mm.
backlogged. Every time you do a resubmittal, you're waiting 30 to 60 days just for them to look at it.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then like obviously like when deals take longer like that, there's another challenge that comes up, which is just you've got cash in these things. You're spending money on these vendors. I'm assuming they all don't want to wait till the end to get paid, right? So how
Exactly.
do you manage that aspect of the business?
That is, the one that helps you, lose sleep and hair because yeah, when you're in a project, you're like, "Oh, this should take 12 months," and then it's, 24 months, and you've had a rental fence up on the property now for 2 years, and you just start watching that P&L, with a lot more red numbers than black numbers, and that, is concerning at times, but yeah, it's budgeting the deal right up front for those contingencies that could go wrong, and
Mm.
some of that takes experience and takes getting lumps as you go. But yeah, it's just understanding the deal. And that's why I like buying properties as cheap as possible so that you can weather that storm because they are going to happen. You'll get some home run deals. You'll fly through. Like we had one that, we made 300, was it? So 410,000 after trade payouts. And that was a 90-day deal. That was amazing. But that's when the market was
Yeah.
in a different place and people were buying preliminary. So now that we're needing full entitlements, those margins are down a little bit and the risk is a little higher. But it's the nature of the
Mm,
beast. The wave's gonna come back and builders gonna go crazy and gangbuster again. And we have set up in the company as soon as we start seeing that going the right way, some marketing streams that we're going to turn back on. But for right now, we're looking for deals that we could sit in for a year and not stress it at all because we're into it so cheap.
gotcha. What are those are those like the more traditional marketing streams that like wouldn't be these partial
Yeah.
interest deals or okay.
Yeah, all of your, direct mail, PPC, RVMs, text messages. If you're brave enough, we're still hesitant on if what's allowed and what's not. Some people are more brave than I, and they just YOLO 100,000 texts a month, and all the power to them. I don't feel like ending up in litigation for that. But yeah, so we kind of have those ready to go as soon as we start seeing things heading in the right way. We'll turn them all back on.
Gotcha. But for now you're really focused on how can I get, the best deal possible on the front end. And then
Exactly, and the nice thing is you don't need a giant volume to make, 7 figures a year if you're buying these things super deep. If you're say you're into a lot for 15 grand in air buyouts, 20K in taxes, but it's worth 400, you can't really lose
mm,
on that deal no matter what happens in the market.
yeah. And then like so another question is like, if you've got acquisitions people, it sounds like how do you work out their compensation structure? Because, obviously waiting, most people don't want to wait 2 years for a payday, right? So how do you
Yeah,
handle that?
exactly. So that is something we work out. So we give them two options, like a cash now buyout, or if they
Okay.
want to sit in it, a much higher payout because they're riding in the risk with us. So kind of give them either option. Hey, I could put 5 grand in your pocket today, and then you're out of the deal. Or if you want to ride this out, like the commission's gonna be 35 grand. So what works best for you? And we still do get a lot of infill lots that we will purchase, then put on market and flip and that kind of stuff. So those keep the lights on as we're doing the other stuff just from word of mouth, JV deals, and still have some cold callers just reaching out to those lists to see what comes through.
Gotcha. So guys still are doing those like smaller deals
Yeah,
along the way just to keep things rolling. Yeah.
yeah, of course, yeah.
Gotcha. And then, I guess for people who don't really have much experience in landing, getting, or maybe thinking about getting into it, what's your advice for them?
The biggest thing is really understanding the numbers because we see so many pieces of land get locked up and put on dispo blast lists over and over and over. I get sent the same lot that's in Phoenix about every 3 months. Hey, will you buy this? And it's the same number because the seller's firm on his number, but wholesalers are just trying to make a deal go through. So they're just throwing it out there and seeing what sticks, which I've been there myself, so I know how it goes. But knowing your numbers will, one, help you have a better conversation with the seller, and
Mm,
it'll help you find better deals early on that are actually going to sell so you're not wasting your time. And a lot of it is just doing the research, and with stuff like chat gpt, grok ai, it's there's no excuse not for knowing what goes into it because you can ask one of those ais, hey, what will all go into developing a 2400 square foot home on this lot? And the system will ask you, does it have utilities? No. Well, what would it cost to put a water meter? And it'll go pull as much data as it can find and then give you those kind of numbers of, hey, this is what the
uh,
average price per square foot to build is. Here's your utility installation. Here's your permits and fees. And now you have some numbers you can go back to the seller with and say, hey, these are all the numbers that it's going to take me to build your lot. And this is why I can't pay your number. And sometimes
mm,
now that's negotiating more intellectually than emotional based, which a lot of sales guys would say doesn't work. But in some situations, being that person to say, this is why your lot's not selling, even though you get locked up with a different agent or wholesaler every month. And we've had
mhm,
some people come down significantly on their prices just because we are the first people to show them the numbers and why it didn't make sense.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. What else do you think is important for besides knowing your numbers for people kind of getting into doing land?
Knowing your numbers, not wasting sellers' time. Like if you building
Mhm,
a buyer's list is pretty important in land, and you don't even need a big buyer's list. If you say, I always recommend everyone start with infill lots. Utilities are normally there,
mm,
zoning is right. It's vacant land that a builder can build on, and you can ask AI, hey, what are the top counties that are still having new single family development, and then you could build a list based on that. And you can even go into the records and now try to find any deceased owners and then work out the heirship. Obviously, that's a little more complex and more advanced strategy. But working with info lots, cut your teeth on some of these deals, start to understand it, get up to speed, send some emails back and forth with the county. Even if you know what the lot zoning is, send an email off to the county saying, hey, what can be built here? Is there any issues that you guys are seeing that would prevent me from building a house? And sometimes that'll save you a ton of money because of like, yeah, this lot was split incorrectly. It's going to need this, this, and this. And building those relationships with the planning and zoning department's huge. Going to the planning and zoning website and pulling off of all their building requirements, it's going to
Mm,
help you understand it better. It's going to help you understand what could be done. And you'll start to see opportunity where most people miss because they'll look at a lot that's just zoned single family and overpass that it could go for multifamily. And if you have that leverage, that's how you can make some big money where most people pass. Or even knowing if it's a 12,000 square foot lot, but the zoning gives you 6,000 square foot minimum, you could split that lot. Now you have double. So while some people are like, oh, the guy wants 100,000 for this lot, which is above market value for other lots in the area, but if you can split it into two, now you can make a deal happen. Or
mm.
finding, we've also had some success with this, is finding lots that are say 2 acres. A house is far on one side, and then we go to the seller and say, hey, I'm not trying to buy your house. I just want to know if you'd be willing to sell off that back 1 acre. And that's been
Ah,
really advantageous for us, or really beneficial for us, is splitting off that 1 acre because nobody wants to sell their house if they don't have to. But if
mhm.
it's just land they're not using, and normally you can see it for like virtually driving for dollars, jumping on a map, and you see it's nothing but overgrown trees in the backyard for the last 30 years. They're probably not using it. And you can say, hey, well, leave the tree line. You won't even see the new house behind you. But what if you
Yeah.
could turn that vacant land behind you into 60 grand you didn't know you had? And then, so there's a few different ways to pitch stuff. And we helped a lady out that was facing foreclosure after her husband died. It was a 15K assignment, which wasn't, crazy in the scheme of deals, but a lot of moral. It was a good moral victory win on just being able to help her out because everyone else was like, oh, you got to sell your house. She's like, I will die in this house, so I have to pry me out of it. And he said, hey, you don't have to sell the house at all. We'll split this lot off back here and you're good to go. And she's like, you can do that? I'm like, yeah, we'll get the surveyor out, get it all done up for the deed, and boom. And so she was able to completely cover the existing mortgage and her solar mortgage. And now she's debt free, which is awesome.
Wow. That is
Yeah.
pretty cool. Yeah. I
So
never even thought
there's
of
some
that
fun.
strategy.
And
Yeah.
there's some fun stuff if you just understand. And the funny thing is, I ask everybody this: have you done a land deal? And some people have been at wholesaling houses for 5 years. Like, no, I've never touched land. I'm like, what's the deed actually for? Is it for the house or is it the land under it? And they're like, oh, that's a good point. I'm like, everybody's done a land deal, so why wouldn't you want to know how to maximize those opportunities that may come across just by
Mhm.
knowing what the zoning is, what the lot is, lot minimums are, and stuff like that? Because there's a ton of value add just splitting up some land that most people pass over.
Yeah. So if someone wanted to find that information really quick, maybe they're out there and they're wholesaling some houses and maybe they're like, wow, maybe I've missed some of these opportunities. What resource would they go to find out if like maybe a lot could be split off a property?
So the fastest way to do it, I'm in love with AI. We're using it way too much. It's probably making us all dumber. But AI is a shortcut, or just go to the planning and zoning for your county or city, and they have
Mhm.
all this information readily available in majority of the counties and cities. If it's some tiny little town in the middle of nowhere, they might not have it as readily available. But otherwise, you can go to like the planning and zoning department, the development department, and start going into all the PDFs they have and take some time. You're going to do some reading, but it's well worth the investment if you're trying to do this.
Yeah. Gotcha. And you touched on it a little bit here, but we were talking offline about like how one of the things you guys are kind of uniquely good at is finding opportunities where others pass over it. I mean, I know you gave one example there of that lady, right, with the foreclosure, but can you talk about maybe like one or two other times that you guys have been able to make a deal out of something that everyone thought there was maybe nothing there?
Yeah, there's a situation where it was a failed project. The lady ran out of money after completing the underground work and slabs for a 10-unit apartment complex.
Mm,
No, everybody looked at the deal and said, "Oh, it was a dead deal. It's not good enough." But when I got eyes on it and ran the numbers, at the time interest rates were still really low. It was in a prime area of Arizona, and I started running numbers because I knew how to back engineer this. I'm like, "Oh, there's a ton of value here still." She had already had everything was green tagged, meaning everything had been approved underground. She had done a lot of the heavy lifting on this project already. So we were able to
mm,
go under contract and get it sold for her relatively quickly. I think we closed in like 45 days, and it's because all of her permits were still approved, which makes it so much easier compared to like a failed project where the permits have expired. Now you have to go re-up for it, and hopefully any of the
Ah,
codes haven't changed. So understanding the codes and everything that goes along with it, it can open your eyes to stuff that a lot of people passed over because that deal got shopped around and nobody would touch it on any blast list. And it got sent to me by a friend, Ingrid Hernandez, and like, lock this up immediately. This is a this is a banger of a deal, and the assignment fee on that was 250 grand. So we made quarter
wow.
million out of a deal that everybody else said was dead and wasn't worth the time.
Wow. Okay. And
Yeah.
then, I guess, I mean, you guys are doing stuff in multiple different markets now. Like, how do you keep your pulse on like all these different? I mean, I could see if you're doing it just in Phoenix, you're like, okay, here's the rules in Phoenix. But like, I mean, how do you keep your pulse on like different states, different cities, different counties?
A lot of boring work when the after hours and stuff like that, just kind of watching the trends. And that's the other reason why I love that DPA strategy that Logan does is you're into these so cheap that no, you're the risk is almost non-existent if you do the front end work right, just because you're into these things for so cheap. But for the larger entitlement, we're moving a lot slower now, really trying to understand the market, making sure we have multiple exits, building relationships with commercial brokers in the area, saying, hey, what's moving, what's not, watching all of the
Mm,
recent sales trends, watching building costs. For the entitlement side, there's a lot you kind of have to keep your pulse on, just so you
mm,
don't lose money on these entitlement deals. But there's still opportunities out there, and looks like we're heading in the right direction. We already had a slight rate decrease, so that's good. And if we keep getting those, I think we should start seeing a little more investor buyer or some investors that were sitting on the sideline come back to play again, as hopefully, anyways. But
yeah.
that and
What
just
would?
mirror what some of the bigger players are doing. Some of these companies, these giant
Mm,
institutional builders, they have hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, and they spend a ton of money on research. And if you can just mirror what they're doing, like if DR Horton's randomly buying some land right next to some infill lots that you're going after, that's a pretty good indicator that there's going to be some new development. I do
yeah.
like to see ground get broken before we start marketing to an area, because some of the big builders
Mm,
also will buy land and sit on it for a decade because they can.
uh,
So we like to see areas where some new houses are going up, and then that's like, all right, let's start targeting stuff around it.
okay. Gotcha. And then, another question I was going to ask you. I totally slipped my mind. We'll move on to something else.
It'll come back to you in like 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'll come back. I'll come back towards the end of the show. Um, oh yeah, what's your? I mean, I know obviously you've shifted over time, but like right now in today's current market, I know you're in a couple different markets, so maybe the answers could be different for each market. But what does your ideal deal look like for you?
Ideal deal. Just because we do so much from infill lots all the way up to the larger entitlements and then the, curative title space, what can we get into for as cheap as possible that's going to return the largest investment? I know it's kind of a cliche, cheesy answer to give you, but that's really what we're looking at is what's our, uh, you know, cash conversion cycle going to be, and is it worth the
Mm,
time? Because if we're going to spend 90 days working on a deal to make 10 grand, why don't we spend that same time working on something that's going to make 100 if it just takes a little more cash up front? So just kind of looking at the cash conversion cycle and what's worth it for the team, because we
yeah,
still get some of these deals where it's like a 5K wholesale fee, but it needs to be probated, and it's just like, does it make sense to sit
yeah,
there for 3 months and front the probate costs and for 5 grand? Probably not. If we can put that 5 grand into an heir's pocket and now control 50% of a deal worth a quarter million. So that's kind of
yeah.
how we're just looking at everything right now, is what markets do we think are going to be a little more stable in the upcoming years? Things
Mm,
seem to be pretty stagnant right now, which isn't good nor bad, unless you're doing flips and got some money into a couple residential flips. They're not doing great right now, but so it's just kind of looking at risk to reward, I guess, is the easiest way to put it.
uh-huh. Is there a certain like target number that you guys are shooting for profit on a deal? Or is it also like a combination of how much time it's going to take? Like, how do you guys look at that?
Exactly. Yeah. If it's going to take under 30 days, we'll, just do some typical wholesale deals for, the 10 to 15K range. If we can buy a lot and at least make a 35% return on the investment, that's something
Mm.
that we'll do too, because I can't get that kind of return anywhere else. So we
Mm.
do buy a lot of little infill lots here and there if we can do that. On the curative title stuff, we're looking for at least $100,000 profit on each deal, just
Mhm.
because you never know. You think you got the whole family tree, then a whole another branch sprouts out, and you have 16 more people to go pay out, which is
Mhm.
one we're dealing with right now in Dallas. But yeah, just looking at 100K on the DPAs. We'll still do the smaller wholesales as they come through, just 'cause it's quick cash back in your pocket. So why not? But yeah,
Yeah.
looking for the larger spreads.
Gotcha. And those land deals are those 35% ones, that's just assuming you, buy something, put it back on the MLS, sell it to whoever wants it type deal?
Buy it on the MLS, split it up into smaller lots, that kind of stuff. Sometimes we'll look at maybe it's a great road, but it doesn't have legal access, or at least that's what people don't think. It just doesn't have physical
Mm.
access. So we'll dig through the old surveys or get a surveyor out to find that easement, because in Arizona it's hard to find a true landlocked parcel. Then obviously
Huh.
sometimes there's some haggling with the neighbor to move a fence, and we try to do it outside of litigation if possible, and say, hey, we'll put a couple grand in your pocket, we'll pay to move the fence and put a road in, stuff like that. Anything we can do to kind of just do a little value add.
Oh, that's an interesting strategy. Okay, so people will think it's landlocked and no one wants that, and then you guys
Yeah,
will figure out that it's really not and solve that problem.
exactly.
And then what,
And a lot
just
of
put
it,
it back in the market or
yeah, yeah, and that a lot of people don't realize this information's just a lot of people don't want to spend 8 hours digging through old surveys and plat maps and finding the old easement, and gotten really good at that. So that's a tool for the toolbox, is knowing how to take legal descriptions and search that within these different sites to find what you need.
Yep,
Yeah.
gotcha. Well, we're getting close to the end here, and there's always 2 questions I ask at the end of the show, and the first is, what is the craziest or most uncomfortable situation that you have ever experienced in a real estate deal?
So I have to dance around this one carefully because it's still active going litigation. But there was a situation where we went under contract with an individual to purchase some land, and we were going to do a double escrow on it. So we were going to close on it, then immediately resell to another buyer.
Mhm.
She found out we were going to resell it, got upset about it, said she wasn't going to sign. Ended up she was then threatening to sue me if I didn't drop my memo. We had to get our attorneys engaged to go for specific performance. We're about a year into this process so far, and $45,000. And she has fired 2 attorneys so far because they keep telling her to just settle this. Mediation failed. We've tried everything. I've offered, hey, let's put this on market if you think it's worth way more than I'm offering you. And we'll, make myself whole plus what we're going to make. And then, you can keep whatever's left. And she is just not willing to have any sort of civil discussion with us about that. It's unfortunate situation. And litigation, while it always seems sexy on TV with the attorneys arguing in court, it's not as sexy when you're fronting the bill and you're out $40,000 hoping that money comes back. Because with courts, you never really know how a judge is going to see it and how
Mhm.
things are going to shake out. And we've seen some cases where even though people were dead right by the law, a judge may see something differently based on different factors. So we feel very strongly in our position. Obviously, since we're so invested in, I know the attorney handling it's an amazing attorney, and he's the one that drafted the contract, and that's why we feel so strong defending our
Okay.
position. But real estate does get messy, and sometimes you have to hold your line and be willing to stand your ground, and know who you're dealing with, because sometimes people just like to be stubborn.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. So the final question I always like to ask is, if you could go back in time, give yourself one piece of advice when you were looking for that first real estate deal, knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself?
So I in the beginning, I thought I knew everything about land based on my background from building houses and building, small multifamily and stuff for other companies. I would have dug deeper into understanding it, got into sales training way sooner, and
Mm.
just jumped into it way sooner than I did. Thankfully, I had a good mentor back at the time, Jesse Burrell, who kind of took me under his wing because I closed a few wholesale deals, but I wouldn't let go of the day job because I needed the security. And he's like, how much you making at your day job? I'm like, oh, 2 grand a week or whatever. He's like, and you closed how much in wholesale deals last month? I closed three for like 8 grand total or whatever. And he's like, so you're actually losing money at your day job when you could be doing this full time. And just being able to take that leap. Obviously, don't do it if you're have no safety reserve. Build up a little safety net first. I'm not telling people to quit their job and go do this full time tomorrow, although it is definitely a motivating factor when you either have to sink or swim. So going back, I would have spent a lot more time getting up to speed quick. I would have avoided unnecessary expenses and buying 6 different courses, chasing the shiny object. I think something most people do when we get into real estate is I want to do houses and multifamily, and I want long-term rentals, and I want short-term rentals. I got sucked into that. So if I could go back, I would have picked one
Mhm.
lane, hyper focused on that one lane, and become the master of it even faster, which would have helped me get out of my day job even quicker. So
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. If people want to reach out to you after the show, man, if they have any questions, I know you also have a course on land. Like, how can they go about reaching out to you?
yeah, we actually started a school community because we do have like the free land course, which is Mavro Academy, which is just a free intro into looking at utilities and different due diligence processes and stuff like that. So I just put it out for free just so people could kind of get into the game. All the stuff that I wish I knew sooner. They can reach out to me on Instagram, Pappas at Instagram, Anthony at mavroproperties.com if you want to shoot me an email. I'm not going to give out my phone number anymore because I've made that mistake. But yeah, if you want to shoot me an email, join the school community. It's land investing at school. So we're going to start building that up and putting out a ton of free content for people to get started, and then just help other people find us and success, because it does feel good when you're able to break away from that day job and start doing what you enjoy.
Cool. Well, awesome, man. Thanks for being on the show.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for having me on.